Am I audible? Okay, thank you. అన్ని చూడండి. So good morning, all of you. My name is Dr. Ashok S. Sanganal. I am working as a senior faculty and head at the Center for Disaster Management in Administrative Training Institute, Mysore. Today, we are going to discuss an important subject on disaster management. This is a very wide subject actually. So we will be covering under the Unit 1 an introduction to the disaster management that includes some of the basic terminologies and disaster management cycle, and also we will be discussing about the pre and post disaster management phases. We will also be classifying the disasters, and we will also analyze the causes and effects of disasters, and also discuss the profile of the vulnerability profile of India and world, and also explain the stages in disaster management cycle and different phases and some of the basic terminologies related to the disaster management cycle. This is under the Unit 1 and we'll start with one by one. So you can see from the screen, disasters are increasing every year, and you can see here that the occurrence of by disaster type by 2020 compared to 2000 to 2019, the average number of disasters in 2000 to 2019 as compared to the number of disasters in 2020. You can see the huge difference in the average number of disasters that have happened during the years from 2000 to 2019 and in the year 2020 alone. So there is a significant increase in the number of disasters as compared to the last 20 years. So you can see here the number of the different types of disasters: drought, earthquake, extreme temperature, flood, landslide, mass movement, storm, volcanic activity, wildfires. We can see here by the type of disaster or the kind of disasters. We can see hydrometeorological disasters, we can see geological disasters, we can also see even biological disasters here. Both human induced and natural disasters can be seen from the screen, and the number of disasters that have happened under the hydrometeorological, particularly the flood, the number of disasters are more as compared to other disasters. You can see flood and storm, which both comes under the hydrometeorological disasters, are more in number as compared to other disasters. So this can also be attributed to the change in the climate over the last many years. So the global warming, climate change, and its impact across the globe might be one of the causes for increasing number of disasters under the hydrometeorological area. So you can see flood and flood under the flood number of instances are more here, even under the storm also. So let us see the other aspects of disaster management. So let us define now. Once we know what the world profile of the disasters, we can now define what is disasters. So as just we are giving training to a large number of officers here in ATI in Center for Disaster Management. But as a student, you must also know the clear definition of disaster under the Disaster Management Act 2005. So one should know the definition. It is very broad-based definition, which is inclusive of all the aspects of disaster. So under the Disaster Management Act 2005, the disaster is defined as any catastrophe, mishap, calamity, or grave occurrence in any area arising from natural or man-made causes or by accident or negligence, which results in substantial loss of life or human suffering or damage to and destruction of property or damage to or degradation of environment, and is of such a nature or magnitude as to be beyond the coping capacity of the community of the affected area. So I just would like to say that this definition is very elaborative and inclusive of almost all the aspects of disaster, because there are different definitions for disaster. But some definitions say that any sudden event leading to loss of life and damage to the property is defined as disaster. So that is also a definition, but this definition under the Act is more inclusive, because the disasters can be due to negligence also, or by accident, or due to human induced causes, or due to natural causes, and that may lead to loss of life, loss of damage to the properties, and also degradation of environment. So generally such disasters under this Act uh, implies that it is very difficult for the local community to manage or cope up with such impacts of the disasters. So if such is the situation at the local level, if they could not, if they cannot possible to manage themselves with their own resources at the community level, such events can be defined as disaster under the Disaster Management Act 2005. So let us. So another important definition you should also know is hazard. What is an hazard? Hazard. If there is no hazard, generally we do not come across any disaster. So hazard is something which is pre-phenomena or a pre-situation of a disaster. So their hazards could be even a heavy rainfall leading to flood, even an earthquake-prone area leading to earthquake, or any industrial establishment or a chemical industry leading to chemical disaster. Any such phenomena or a situation that could lead to dangerous situation to the community there around, or it may damage the properties around that place. Such phenomena or situation could also be called hazard. So let us see the definition actually. You can see the hazard is any damaging physical event or phenomenon or human activity that may cause the loss of life or injury, property damage, social and economic disruption, or environmental degradation. So hazard is something, it can be physical event like a boulder on the top of the mountain. If it is slided, with sliding, it may cause disaster. So such event could also be, even it is a building which is unsafe, could also be a hazard for the residents of that building. Even a floodplain, the where the houses are constructed around the floodplain, along the floodplain, can also become a hazard during heavy rainfall, so leading to flood. So hazard, I have given some examples of hazard. So here you can see the picture here. So this is a hazard. So during heavy rainfall, this may slide and cause damage and loss of life to the people who are there living there. So this is called hazard. Let us move to the other definitions. So we'll also define what is vulnerability. So vulnerability is something related to the physical, social, or economic or environmental factors or processes which may increase the susceptibility of the community to the impact of hazards. So vulnerability is accumulated due to the presence of hazards in that area. If there is a hazard, there is definitely a vulnerability, and vulnerability can be in different forms. It can be social vulnerability, it can be physical, or it can be environmental, economic, or in any other forms. So you can see physical vulnerability by location. Suppose the people are living on the exactly on the bank of the sea or coastal belt, within 500 meters of the coastal belt, or on the bank of the coast, or on the bank of the river. So definitely by location, by virtue of their location, or by virtue of their houses in the on the exactly on the bank of the river, or a sea, definitely they are likely to be affected by cyclone or tsunami, or even coastal erosion sometimes. So that is physical vulnerability. If I give an example of social vulnerability, in the same house, some people may be more vulnerable as compared to others during any earthquake or flood. So, for example, the persons with disabilities cannot escape as fast as others. So they may be more vulnerable. So it is called. It can be one of the factors which you can define as social vulnerability. Similarly, many other examples can be quoted under social vulnerable. Generally, we can say in any disaster, children, women, aged persons, or any other persons who are vulnerable could be more socially vulnerable as compared to other persons. What do you mean by economic vulnerability? Economic vulnerability again relates to the backward and forward linkages with the maybe economic activities, livelihood activities, etc. So during any flood or earthquake, many industries will collapse. The employees working there would also be not only get affected, but also the production, manufacturing, supply chain links, etc. will get cut off. So that will continue until the industries comes back to their original shape. So that is what we can call as economic vulnerability. Under environmental factors, you can see in recent flooding in Kodagu or Belgavi or some of the northern Indian states. So many, even many rivers have changed their course of flow. So that has resulted into uh, uh, environmental degradation of the forests and their channels of flow. So that is one factor that you can classify under environmental factors. So anything that is susceptible to any hazard, the area which is vulnerable to flood, area vulnerable to earthquakes. That is why the India is classified into different vulnerable zones, earthquake zones, or flood zones, or any other for different types of disasters. So this is what is called vulnerability. Let us move to other definitions now. So why I shown this picture here? So this is a hazard actually. This is an area which is vulnerable to this particular landslide, maybe this boulder slide. So that is why I'm saying vulnerability is always measured in terms of either area or number of houses, number of people likely to be affected by this particular disaster. So we can always measure the vulnerability in terms of area or in terms of number of people or number of houses likely to be collapsed during the disaster. Let us move to the next definition. So risk is another important factor one should understand under the disaster management. So any disaster management student must know what is risk, disaster risk. So disaster risk is generally a measure of losses and damages. So we can the sum total of losses and damages due to any disaster is called risk. So it can also be measured before the disaster, or it can also be measured even after the disaster. So generally the risk is we generally call risk is proportional, directly proportional to the hazard, vulnerability and exposure, and inversely proportional to the capacity. So that is how the risk is defined, and we generally measure risk because in the vulnerable areas we must measure the risk before the disaster, and we will also check how much is the risk, how much is the loss and damage after the disaster. For example, in the recent disasters in northern Karnataka and even in southern part of Karnataka across the country, we have measured post-disaster losses and damages for long-term recovery. So we measured, we have estimated the losses and damages in terms of crores of rupees. So the losses to the critical infrastructure like roads, electricity, telecommunications, uh, drains, etc., housing, etc. So that has amounted to crores of rupees, not only in the state of Karnataka, but across the country in different states. So that means to say that Indian government is spending, not only Indian government, across the globe, almost all the countries have been spending a lot of money for for the, not only for the recovery, but also to bring back the situation to the normalcy. They have to spend a lot of money, and for the spending the before spending the lot of money, the exercise is to estimate the losses and damages exactly, to see that the long-term recovery to sustain to sustain and also to bring the situation back to the normalcy. That is, that means to say it is the amount of money, amount of resources required for long-term and sustainable recovery of the area after the disaster. So you understood what is risk now. Risk is basically the measure of the losses and damages due to any disaster. So we'll go to the next one now. So another important term in disaster management is capacity. Capacity is the ability to take care of or manage the disasters. So basically, that includes both human resources and material resources. It can be machines. It can also be money. So even equipment like what we have shown on the screen, like there's a weather station at every 25 square kilometer. We have GPRS enabled solar powered telemetric ranger station. We have GPRS enabled and solar powered telemetric weather stations. I'm just showing some of the examples which have been installed in Karnataka state and even in other states also like Bihar and Gujarat, etc. So here one more equipment is placed on the right side. That is ham radio. Whenever all telecommunication lines have failed or collapsed during any major disaster, ham radio comes to our rescue in terms of for the purpose of communication from the site of disaster to the control room. So such activities, such resources, not only such resources, but many other resources are required during the disaster situation. That is what is known as capacity. Capacity could be human resource, human capacity. Human capacity means basically skilled manpower for managing disasters like search and rescue, relief, rehabilitation, etc. So that is capacity. If they do not have any skills, human resources could also cannot be called resources or capacity. So even the equipment, right equipment, like boat is required for bringing for taking the people to the safer areas during flood. The boat should also be functional and it should be properly used. Otherwise, the boat will also become unfit for managing the disaster. So such even such materials, equipment, human resources, uh, even money also, because money is also required. That is also capacity. One of the capacities, important capacities of under the disaster management is money. Basically, budget. How much budget you have earmarked during this year or next year, like that, next 5 years. So that is very important because every year we are noticing disasters, we are experiencing disasters. So we need money, we need manpower, we need other resources. We have to fulfill all these resources, capacities in order to manage the disasters. And by the next 2030, the capacity should be such that the tolerance to the disaster should be zero. So we must bring back the losses and damages to zero by 2030. That is the agenda under this Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, which was held in Sendai, in Japan, which India is also signatory to the SFDRR. SFDR means Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. So Indian government is also signatory to that, and we are in the process of achieving zero tolerance to the disasters, or bringing the losses and damages to zero by 2030. So under that agreement, we are all working now. Our institution is basically, our center is basically trying to impart training to all the officers in the government, in the state, starting from group A, B, C, D, everybody, right from the state level to the Gram Panchayat level. So that is part of our duty here, in addition to research and other activities. So capacity is something which we need to understand in disaster management. That's one of the most important part of disaster management. Let us move to the next one. So that is why we always say risk is proportional to the hazard and vulnerability. Even exposure also you can add here. Hazard and vulnerability, and inversely proportional to capacity. As the capacity is enhanced, your risk gets reduced yearly. So your capacity should be developed in such a way that risk becomes a zero by 2030. This is the agenda which we are implementing in the country now, even in Karnataka state also. So we have already here, everything is mentioned here. So let us move to the next one. So since we are discussing what is let us now define the disaster management. Like any definition of disaster management, all of your management students, you know the definition of management. So the disaster management, we added one word, additional word, disaster, to the management. That is all actually. It is a continuous and integrated process of planning, organizing, coordinating, and implementing measures which are necessary for prevention of danger or threat of any disaster. So basically, I would like to mention some of the keywords which are included in the management of disasters. What are those? You can say, you can easily remember like this. There are two phases of disaster. One is pre disaster phase, and other one is post disaster phase. So managing both the phases is basically disaster management, which involves proper disaster management plans, which involves proper organizing of the basic structures for teams and groups, etc. And among the different departments, we need to have proper coordination of the resources, both human and other material resources, and we will be implementing the action plans prepared for disaster management, both written as well as oral plans. That is known as disaster management. So it includes, I said, pre and post disaster stages. Pre disaster stage basically includes preparedness, mitigation, prevention, and post disaster phases includes search and soon after the disaster, what you do? We go there, do the search and rescue operations, and rescue the people to the safer, evacuate the people to the safer places. That is one important post disaster phase soon after the disaster. And soon after that, what we will do? We will do relief operations. We will provide them relief, compensation, money, food, etc., to the disaster affected people in the safer shelters. And what we do later, maybe after 2 3 months, uh, what we will do? We'll start rehabilitating them, or we will start recovering as well as rehabilitating them to the proper places. Includes livelihood activities. It could also be related to the development of housing, infrastructure, etc. So that comes under rehabilitation. So these are post disaster phases. So managing these two important phases is part of the disaster management. So in between, we'll also do losses and damage assessment, which I just mentioned in the previous slide. So loss and damage assessment is done in order to assess the amount of money required, amount of resources required to bring the situation back to the normalcy. So that is what is written here, loss and damage assessment. Okay. So you understood now what is disaster management. Let us move to the next one. So I just told you just now disaster management cycle. So again, I wanted to recap that. So please see the line here. It is demarcating pre and post disaster phases. You can see pre-disaster phases. There is a preparedness, there is a mitigation, there is a prevention. Under the post-disaster phases, search and rescue, relief, recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. So a disaster management action plan or disaster management plan must include all these phases. So we have prepared our state disaster management plan here in Karnataka. We are preparing district disaster management plans also, helping the departments to prepare them. At the departmental level, we have departmental plan also, disaster management plan. So at the Gram Panchayat, we have Gram Panchayat disaster management plans. So that comprises all these phases actually. So we have prepared almost all the disaster management plans. All 31 districts have plans now in place. Almost 16 departments in the state have prepared departmental plans like energy, housing, transportation, health and family welfare department, irrigation department, energy, etc., etc. So 16 department plans have been ready now, and they are implementing them. So action plan, basically disaster action plan includes at different stages. We have to, in the first page of any plan preparation is hazard, risk, vulnerability, and capacity analysis. Unless we do hazard risk analysis, we will not be able to go ahead with the preparation of plan, because we know that how many types of hazards are there in the district or in the state or in the country. What is the risk that is there, and how much vulnerability to different types of disasters, and what is the capacity available. We will identify the gaps and try to prepare the plan for all these stages. So if I ask you what are the different types of plans available in India, I can just say we have National Disaster Management Plan in place now, already prepared by the Government of India, Ministry of Home Affairs. We have State Disaster Management Plan in the state of Karnataka and every state, in fact. This has been prepared by the Center for Disaster Management, ADI Mysore, which we have prepared and submitted to the government, and which has been under implementation. And we have District Disaster Management Plan, which has been prepared by all the district administration under our guidance and training programs. We have also village disaster management plans. Village means basically Gram Panchayat level disaster management plans, not only for flood but even drought and other disasters. Every Gram Panchayat is having a disaster management plan in place. At least about 1,500 Gram Panchayats in the state of Karnataka, which are vulnerable Gram Panchayats. Most of them have prepared their plans and they are trying to implement them. We have already, I told you, 16 departments have prepared plans. In fact, under the Disaster Management Act 2005, which I am going to deal with later, all of these are mandatorily to be revised every year. Prepared, not only prepared, it has to be revised every year. So that is what is being done now, not only in the state of Karnataka but across the country now. So let us move to the next one now. So again, I wanted to again recap this. You can see here, I already told you the cycle, basically DM cycle. It includes mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery under the overall influence of reconstruction, restoration, emergency, pre-impact, capacity building, etc. So I will not go much into this. Already it has been explained very well now. Again, I wanted to little more recap of this. So you can just classify the broad classification of disasters. So you can say natural disasters and man-made disasters. Which are the disasters under natural disaster area? So we can say meteorological, topographical, and environmental. Under the human-induced disasters, you can say technological, engineering disasters, etc. We have industrial and chemical, nuclear, etc. Under the warfare, you can say wars between the different countries, even terrorist activities, Naxalite activities, etc. That can also be part of human-induced disasters. Let us move the next one. So I just give a little more elaboration on these types of disasters because you need to know about it. As a student of disaster management, we need to know what are the different types of disasters, the classification of disasters. So under the types of disasters, we classify them as water and climate related disasters. Water and climate related disasters include maybe floods, cyclones, droughts, tornadoes, hurricanes, cloudbursts, snow avalanches, heat and cold waves. And under the geological disasters, we can give examples of earthquakes, landslides, mud flows, sea erosion, dam burst, and dam failures. Under the biological disasters, we can say any epidemic situation, either to the human beings or to the cattle or any wild animals, could also could also be included under biological disasters. For example, COVID-19 was one of the very popular biological disasters. The foot and mouth disease, the skin disease to the recent phenomena, that is to the cows, that also comes under biological disasters. We can add many more examples of biological disasters. Go to the next type of disaster. See, this is a chemical, industrial, nuclear disaster. If I ask you a question, can you name one of the major disasters under chemical, industrial, nuclear sector? So I can say Bhopal gas tragedy was one of the major disasters, which is globally one of the worst disasters ever happened in the history of disasters. So you can quote that example always. It happened in 1984. So, but still the impression is felt among those people who were affected by that disaster in Bhopal. So it can also include forest fires, oil spills, particularly in seas where when they were carrying the crude, etc. That has happened in 2010 in Karwar, oil spillage. So finally, they were struggling to remove the oil from the surface of the sea. So that they did there. Mine fires have been happening almost every year. Mine flooding is there. Nuclear disasters have happened. So these are all come under the chemical, industrial, and nuclear disasters. You can quote many more examples also, but I just stop here. So we can go to the last one. Those four types of disaster. Other than those four types of disasters, we can put them under accident-related disasters. What do you mean by accident-related disasters? All those other than four types of disasters. You can name any of them. Maybe road accident, rail accidents, any transport-related accidents, water transport related accidents, air crashes, etc. It can also be building collapses, even stampede related disasters like large gathering, whenever people gather in mass gatherings, there will be likely that due to rumors or some bad communication or such type of small communication flaws, there are many stampede related disasters, so leading to loss of life. So that is even bomb blast, festival related disasters. So all such type of disasters can be included in accident related disasters. So how many types of disasters are there? If I ask a question, there are five types of disasters. In short, I can say there are five types of disasters. One is hydrometeorological or water and climate related disasters. The other one is geological disasters, chemical, industrial, nuclear disasters, biological disasters, and other than these four are put up in accident related disasters. So these are the five types of disasters which you need to remember uh, in the disaster management. So let us move to the next one. So it is also important to know what are the causes of disasters. So all of you must be knowing earthquakes happen due to plate tectonic movement or volcanic activity or even sometimes mining activities. So all this you already know about it, but still I do not want to go into the depth of the earthquakes. But just at this stage, you must know that earthquakes happen due to tectonic movements or volcanic activity or mining activities, mining blasts under the earth. So these are also some of the causes for earthquakes. What are the causes for tsunami? Maybe it is undersea earthquake. So tropical cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, they're all because of strong winds that circulate. So generally, cyclones happen due to strong winds that circulate. Generally, in India, we expect some of these things right from the Bay of Bengal, where it originates and then it comes to the southern part of India, even spreads to the other parts of India. Cyclone. Sometimes the states like Orissa, West Bengal, West Bengal, Orissa, even Tamil Nadu, Kerala, they experience huge intensity of cyclones as compared to other states. So that is cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, etc. And we come to the floods. So floods happen due to heavy rainfall. Everybody knows about it. Snow melt or high tides, dam burst, and embankment failures also. So embankment failures because embankments generally not properly maintained by the concerned officers in the department. For example, there is a water resource department or irrigation department. They're supposed to maintain the embankments, and if they do not maintain them properly every year, so that likely that the embankment will fail during heavy rainfall. That may also happen. So even dam burst also can happen if it is not maintained properly. So that is the cause for flood. Heavy rainfall at present, heavy rainfall is one of the major causes of flooding. So as you see, almost all the states have experienced flooding last 2 3 years. So even Karnataka also, about 103 taluks experienced huge flooding in Karnataka state. There was no flood at all. So that is the causes for flooding, and then drought. The deficiency of rainfall would lead to drought. Maybe 25 to 30% deficiency from the average rainfall is there, then it will declare it as drought. If it is more than 50%, to declare as a severe drought, moderate drought, severe drought, etc. Depending on the various factors. Not only scarcity of water, but also other factors are also there. Vegetation index, water moisture content in the water, moisture content in the soil, even the level of water in the dams, tanks, etc. Surface water, groundwater, etc. All of them will be taken into account for declaring drought. So volcanic eruption. So you already know volcanic eruption is not so much prevalent in India, but still you should know as a student of disaster management, volcanic eruptions are caused by molten rock when it is ejected as a lava or ash. Landslides. So landslides are also very much due to the results of not only heavy rainfall, earthquakes, but also undercutting of slopes. So many times landslides have happened due to man-made causes only. If you take the example of Uttarakhand, landslides, or even Madikeri or Kodagu district landslides, or Karwar or any other districts, landslides are happening nowadays due to human-induced causes because of the cutting of the slopes, making the slope unstable, construction of buildings on the unstable slopes without proper foundation, anchoring, etc. So all such activities are taking place, which will lead to landslides. So man-made disasters. So you all know man-made disasters. Basically, man already is there. They are all anthropogenic disasters, human-induced disasters. People, maybe attacks from other countries, intrusions we call that, nuclear weapons, biological wars, etc. So all of these are caused, these are all man-made disasters. Okay, so you just say what are some of the causes. There are many causes actually. I just mentioned very few of them for the benefit of all of you. So let us move to the next one now. Now you know the causes for disaster. Just now we discussed. Let us move to the effects of disasters. What could be the effects of disaster? What will happen when earthquake happens? We experience a lot of physical destruction, building collapses, critical infrastructure like roads, electricity, telecommunication, all of them will get destroyed in any major earthquakes. So physical destruction, not only in earthquakes, but even in flood also, during flood also it happens. So any disaster carries with it a lot of physical destruction. So as you see in Bhuj earthquake or Lathur earthquake in India, recent earthquake across the globe. So in Egypt and other countries, Italy. So many countries have faced major disasters. As you can see, Pakistan, China, even flooding, Kerala flooding, Karnataka flooding. So if you name many, many more disasters. So every disaster carries with it huge physical destruction, huge loss of life, and huge loss of huge damages to the properties, infrastructure, etc. So that is what is known as physical destruction. What is the emotional toll? So I just want to say that people not only experience their damages and losses in terms of physical properties, in terms of their other losses, but also emotionally, psychologically, socially also. So emotionally means they get stressed. They will lose, might have lost their kith and kin. Maybe the parents might have lost their children, or children might have lost their parents, or aged persons might have lost their life. So all these would lead to a lot of psychological stress, leading to emotional toll and psychosomatic disorders. All that happens during any disasters. So economic concerns means the the funding livelihood. They might automatically they lose their livelihood activities. Many of them, maybe those employees will lose their jobs if they are working in certain industries which have collapsed, and even home-based economic activities also get affected. If they are affected by flood or earthquake, they might have lost their equipment, machineries, etc. So a lot of economic concerns will be there during any disasters. What are the indirect effects of disasters? There are a lot of not only direct effects, but there are more indirect effects, because disaster is not usually the impacts of the disaster are not usually visible to the eyes many times. There are more social impacts, psychological impacts, mental effects which are not easily, which are unseen by the officers whenever they go for providing relief, rehabilitation, compensation, etc. So they are more actually indirect impacts. Effects are more prevalent in any disaster as compared to physical effects or direct effects. Geographically also they get affected. So as you can see, many rivers have changed their directions. Many earthquakes have led to division of the lands, etc. So many things have happened geographically, environmentally, disruption of utilities, basically sanitation, drains, roads, water supplies, telecommunication, etc. Most of the utilities will get affected during any disaster. And social consequences, as I just now mentioned, many people will get affected by the disaster, and their social fabric, their social community life will get affected during disaster all of a sudden. So these are some of the effects of disaster. I can say effect or impact of disasters. Let us move to the next one. So we'll go to the vulnerability. We'll also know now, after knowing the effects of disaster, what is the vulnerability profile of India. So how much vulnerable our India is. So we are vulnerable to earthquakes. Under 58% of our area in India is vulnerable to earthquakes. So please remember, it is the highest vulnerability I can say. 58% of our area of India is vulnerable to earthquakes. And the second one is drought. You can see drought, flood, drought only. 16% of the area of India is vulnerable to drought. And third one is flood actually. 12% of our area is vulnerable to flood. And remaining is cyclone actually, 8% area. And landslide is about 3%. So these are some of the major disasters that are happening almost every year in India across the states. So we need to know how much vulnerable we are. Okay. So when I say 58% area is vulnerable to earthquake, doesn't mean that 58% is area is severely vulnerable to earthquakes. Maybe it is classified into four zones. Zone 4, Zone 5 is most highest risk, very high risk. Zone 4 is high risk. Zone 3 is moderate risk, medium risk, and Zone 2 is uh, low risk. Like that, the one is not there now. Safe area is no longer existing now. So that is why I am saying this 58% area is vulnerable to earthquake means that the entire 58% area is classified into four zones. So like that, even landslide also, drought also, flood also, cyclone also. So they are all classified into different zones: high risk, very high risk, moderate, medium risk, and low risk. Like that. Let us move to the next one. As you can see again, India is a vulnerability to different how the disasters happened across the country now during the last many years now. So as I said already, Bhopal gas tragedy in 1984, more than 3,800, about 4,000 people have died in that, and many people, even many more people, were affected by the impact of the gas tragedy. So that is still going on there. Earthquake in Uttarakashi in 1991, more than 2,000 people died in that, injured 2,800. Lathur earthquake in 1993, which I had witnessed myself. I was part of the team for rehabilitation there. So death toll was about 7,000 plus. Uh, and almost all the houses had collapsed there. So we had to go there and rebuild all the houses, making them earthquake resistant. Odisha super cyclone in 99 affected people were more than a lakh. Death toll was more than 10,000. Bhuj earthquake in 2001, about 14,000 people died in that incident. More than about 6 lakh people were affected. Floods in Assam, Bihar, 2004. Death toll was about more than 885. Affected people were about 21,000. In tsunami 2004, death toll was more than 10,000. So you can see here, already it is mentioned here. You can see the thing here. It is basically a tsunami which affected these particular states. Uh, and you can see the uh, these green here. So you see here this Bhuj earthquake basically in Gujarat. It's Bhuj actually. So similarly, other disasters like earthquake in Latur, Maharashtra. You can see here Maharashtra. Similarly, Bhopal gas tragedy you can see here. This is mentioned here. Like that. So these are some of the major disasters, not all kinds of disasters. So it is only an earthquake or cyclone. We have not mentioned flood and other things here. It is limited to basically earthquake, cyclones to some extent. So other disasters are not mentioned here. Let us move to the next one. So I just want to again to say that the India as a whole is classified into four zones actually. Zone 4, 5, 2, 3, 4, and 5. As far as earthquake is concerned, the entire India is classified into 4 zones. If you may ask why zone 1 is not there. Zone 1 was safe actually, safe zone, but it has been removed from the map of India because after Latur and other earthquakes across the globe, they felt that there is no area which is considered as safe against the earthquakes. Therefore, it has been deleted from the code also. This code is there. You can see here later on. Yes, code 1893. This map is there. So this has been deleted actually. Zone 1 has been deleted from the map. So zone 2 means up to maybe up to 4.9 magnitude on the Richter scale. And just telling Richter scale is the scale used for measuring earthquakes, earthquake magnitude. There is one more scale called modified Mercalli scale, which is MMS, we can say. Modified Mercalli scale, which is used for measuring the intensity of the earthquake. These two scales are generally used for measuring both magnitude and intensity of the earthquake. So I'm saying magnitude up to 4.9 means zone 2 area. What is zone 3? Magnitude of earthquake should up to 6.9 on the Richter scale. It is moderate. Zone 4 is high risk area, which is maybe on the Richter scale if the magnitude is up to 7.9. And anything above 8 on the Richter scale is very high risk area. And if you see in the map, you can see the northeastern states, some of them. And also you can see the part of northern Indian belt, some of that, Gangetic belt particularly. And Bhuj area in Gujarat. These are most vulnerable actually, very high risk areas to the earthquakes. And you can say Nepal is also very, very vulnerable, as you see here, the border. So Nepal is also vulnerable, like or neighboring country. It is also under zone 5, much of the area. So what is zone 4 now? Zone 4 is up to 7.9, as I just now said. It is here, the color you can see here, almost all the northern Indian belt, part of some of this area, except that all that area is under zone 3. So you can see here, most of it is under the northern part, northern India. Come to the zone 3. If you come to the zone 3, Karnataka is here, yellow color, all that yellow belt is coming under medium risk. Medium risk means up to 6.9 on the Richter scale. Even 6.9 is very, will lead to a lot of damages, losses, etc. Zone 2 is okay, up to 4.9. The buildings are okay, constructed well, they may not collapse. So that is zone 2. Most of the remaining area is under zone 2. This particularly blue area. So this is the status of entire India as far as earthquake vulnerability is concerned. Let us move to the next one now. I think it is 11 o'clock. We will discuss this particular thing and we will close it and we will start the next hour now. So loss of human life in disasters. If I ask a question, which disaster will cause maximum number of maximum loss of life? Which disaster will cause maximum loss of life? We will say 55% of the people globally, 55% of the people have died due to earthquakes only. This is earthquake actually. Okay. What is the next, the major disaster leading to huge loss of life? That's basically here it is. So this is basically flood. You can see here. So like the 30% of the people will die due to maybe water-related disasters, and other disasters are there, small disasters. Okay. So this ends the unit 1 now. Maybe I'll take 5 minutes. before I commence this, you need to. So we'll start with the unit 2 now. So natural and man-made, this is the area natural and man-made disasters actually. Under the unit 2, we will also discuss a little bit about this. Already we have mentioned somewhere here and there in the previous class what are the natural and man-made disasters. Let us be very specific in this unit and we'll give some more examples. And what are the learning objectives in this? We'll differentiate between natural and man-made disasters and illustrate the examples of natural and man-made disasters. So these are the two objectives which you need to achieve, all of you. So here is the definition of natural disasters. So an immediate extreme event, or it could be the result of a long duration process. For example, I say drought is a very disaster which is very progressive and very slow. It will not happen suddenly. But an earthquake happens very instantly without any notice or any prediction many times. So these are the two extreme events here. One is very instantaneously happening, other one is happening with a gradual process. So these two can be the major examples of natural disasters. Drought, an earthquake, flood, and many more cyclones. These are some of the natural disasters. What will happen if natural disasters happen? It will result in considerable destruction, injuries, deaths, disrupting normal life, as well as the process of development. There is a word called development here. How does it disrupt? So generally we say there are two phases of disaster. One is development, other is uh, uh, development, and also there will be some uh, underdevelopment also. So sometimes entire development what we have done might have disappeared due to disaster, but after the disaster we might have developed it much better than what it was earlier. Both phases are there actually. So disaster generally seen as should be seen sometimes. Natural disasters are anyway inevitable. They are going to happen. So, but still we have an option to do. We means the governments, basically government, public, community, etc. We have a choice. So to redevelop it or develop it much better than the earlier development phase. So that possibility is there. So for natural disasters can happen instantaneously or it can happen progressively in a slow manner. So that is what are known as natural disasters. Generally, which are the disasters that come under natural disasters? I have already mentioned you. So cyclones, floods, basically geological disasters, all kinds of geological disasters. Sometimes they are also man-induced, like mine blasting, etc. But still, geological disasters, landslides, earthquakes, etc., are all part of natural disasters. So let us discuss a little bit about man-made disasters. So anything other than natural disasters, any disaster other than natural disasters. So it can be as small as stampede, it could be a building collapse, it could be a fire incident, it could be a road accident. Any such disasters come under the man-made. So here these events can also be sudden or progressive, just like natural disasters. So they will impact very severely, and also the severity that affects. So these disasters could also be termed as human-induced disasters or of anthropogenic origin. For example, there was a disaster in Mangalore. There was air crash, Mangalore air crash. It is famously known as Mangalore air crash. More than 150 people died in that incident. 157 people died in that incident. So very few people, about three to four people were actually they have jumped from the window and they could rescue themselves. So it is due to later on, based on the report after the examination, they came to the conclusion that it was an error by the pilot. So his ignorance, his negligence, or he might have slept for a while. So that has led to the plane to go ahead of the designated place. So that is human induced only. So this disaster is human induced disaster. So many times building collapse. Why they collapse buildings? Because people have constructed buildings in such a manner that they are not properly designed, not properly planned, not properly provided with foundations, so building materials, etc. So that is why the buildings collapse. Like in Karnataka, there was a collapse of Bellary building, Bellary multi-story building collapse. So that is man-induced only because ignorance. There was a disaster of Rana Plaza building in in Bangladesh very recently. That is all. Everybody knew that the building was unsafe. They constructed more number of floors without permission, and building collapsed without. It was giving notice. Everybody was given notice, but still people were working, ignoring the fact that there's going to be a disaster. There's going to a building is going to collapse. So this was the situation. Man-induced, human-induced disasters are generally the causes or results of human interventions, human negligence, human ignorance. So all these are because of that reason. We can quote hundreds of examples. Many stampedes are happening, many times rumors are leading to a lot of losses of life. Many times people, they get caught into the fires in buildings, multi-story buildings, even hospitals. We have seen many examples in Karnataka, in India, across the globe. Such type of incidents happening almost every day. I mean, generally, what they say is any incident that I have already defined the what is disaster, but globally how they record a disaster. They say that about 100 people are affected, 112 people are affected by any incident, or about 12 people died in that incident. Any such incident across the globe, is human induced or natural disaster, they record it as disaster. So, but many times we don't take this as a definition for the disaster. So basically, natural disasters and man-made disasters. So you understood many examples of natural disasters. You also understood many examples of man-made disasters. So this is a very important thing that you must remember. Let us go to the next one now. You can see the pictures here. If I ask you what is this, so this is basically a cyclone impact, or even tsunami also can be like this only. What is this picture? This is an earthquake. You can see here, earthquake has happened. Therefore, the road has a deep hole inside that. Crack has developed. What is this? You know, this is a drought, very severe drought. So this is a picture of that. This is a natural disaster. What is the one below there? This is a landslide. And here you can see basically flooding, etc. Flooding. This is a volcanic eruption. So these are all natural disasters. Go to the next one now. So now you can see the examples of man-made hazards or disasters. So you can see the industrial fire here. So major disaster. I was just telling you stampedes can also be man-made disasters. So here you can see the number of people lost their life in stampede event. You can see the rail accidents. You can see here war related activities like Naxalite, war activities, terrorist activities, all that kinds of things come under the man-made hazards. You can quote many more examples, but we can stop here and go to the next one. See here also, even dam burst. So recently, Government of India has brought a Dam Safety Act. Why they have brought Dam Safety Act? Because more than 6,000, 7,000 dams built across the country, or most of them are masonry dams with some concrete dams which were built very very long ago. They are very very weak. If they are not maintained properly, if they are not monitored properly about the safety, etc., then they may lead to flooding, because they may get burst and they lead to flooding, huge loss of life and damage to the property. Therefore, dam burst is one of the major man-made disasters. So that's what I'm saying. Therefore, Government of India has brought a Dam Safety Act very recently, last year. We have here another chemical disasters. We can see here chemical industrial disaster. So you could see the examples of Visakhapatnam. That is a man-made disaster. Soon after the COVID-19, they went there, they opened it. Then the gas leak to the chemical leak to the air. Many people were just falling on the road in that particular village. So that is basically chemical disaster. You can sound even biomissiles also. I don't know whether there was a rumor that Russia and Ukraine, they are likely to use such type of missiles. But this type of disaster is also a very very major disaster, leading to huge loss of life if it is done. This is also man-made disaster. So here you can see a biological disaster or a huge epidemic kind of disaster, like COVID-19 or major communicable diseases, epidemic diseases, epidemics condition. So all this is basically a disaster, comes under the biological disaster, biological. So basically that. These are some of the examples of man-made hazards. So go to the next one. So you can see many more examples. Forest fires. Forest fires are happening almost every year, during particularly in the month of March, April, May, June, because of there is a huge high rise in temperature, summer, and therefore there is no moisture, due to man-made causes also many times. So people just throw their cigarette butts and etc. So all that leads to forest fires. Many times even local community with a grudge, that also leads to forest fires. So forest fires are one of the major man-made disasters in India. So in Karnataka also we have been experiencing forest fires almost every year, just like any other state forest fires. So forest fires, fire hazards, all of them are coming under man-made disasters. Even chemical hazard, I've already discussed about this, Bhopal gas tragedy kind of things. Industrial hazard, just now I shown a picture also. An example also I gave, particularly the Visakhapatnam one. Dust hazards, dust also leads to a lot of problems. That is also electrical hazards at home, at offices, at industries, or everywhere. Epidemics, basically, that is also important. Just now I shown a picture, the COVID-19 kind of situation. Road accidents, rail accidents, air accidents, all of them, they're all man-made disasters. You can quote many more examples. I just quoted very few examples, important examples. You can also list many more examples in your exam. So taking tips from here, you can write many more examples in case it is asked. So let us go to the next one. Now I'll quote some examples of natural disasters here. Bhuj in Gujarat. It was one of the major earthquakes in India in 2001 on January 26th, Republic Day. It has happened actually. It had to happen, and the magnitude was 7.7 on the Richter scale. Its depth was 16 kilometers below the earth, focal depth, and epicenter was latitude longitude. You can see here. Maximum intensity was 10 actually on modified Mercalli scale. You can see the impact of the disaster. 20,000 deaths were there. At about 15 lakh people were injured. 2 lakh people were homeless. 2,30,000 houses destroyed, about 4 lakh damaged, 18,000 cattle dead, and damage estimation, loss and damage estimation was about $1.3 billion US dollars. This was estimated in 2001, actually, 2001 situation. So you can just imagine an earthquake of magnitude 7.7 would, could cause so much of losses and damages. So this is an example for natural disaster. Let us go to the next more. We can quote examples actually whenever. That is also good to illustrate the examples. It is Haiti earthquake actually. It's a Caribbean country actually. Haiti is a very underdeveloped country actually, developing country. So there also earthquake happened there. It was magnitude was 7 actually. Even intensity almost 10 actually. You can see between Bhuj and this. If you compare the Haiti earthquake with Bhuj earthquake, almost same, in magnitude. It happened in 2010, but that happened in 2001 in the month of January. So you can see the kind of losses. If you compare the losses between the two incidents, both are earthquake incidents, but here deaths were only about 10,000 there, but deaths here to 2.5 lakhs. Even it is less than that actually in magnitude, but deaths were 2.5 lakhs. How many were injured? Almost 3 lakhs. So totally how much it is? The injured means it is severely injured people actually. In an earthquake, head injuries are very severe injuries, head injury, amputations, etc. etc. So in earthquake we have seen in Rathod, in Bhuj, people lost their leg, lost their hands, lost their limbs, many kind of things happened there. So injured means very severely injured people. So 3.5 lakh people almost dead only. Okay, there are. So that is the kind of effect on the people. You can see the casualties. 1.3 lakh people were displaced, but 1 lakh houses were destroyed, and damaged were about 2 lakhs. You see, out of 30 lakh population, almost 5.5 lakh people have gone. So what is the ratio actually? You can say either so 1:6 or 1:5. Almost one person has died out of five people. This is the problem in earthquake. So you need to be very careful while building houses. Why so much losses and damages as compared to Bhuj? In India also, even in fact it has been managed very well actually as compared to other countries in India, Bhuj, but still the houses that were constructed were very badly constructed, poor building materials, poor foundation, etc. No designs. People just put up the um, stones and mortar and construct their buildings without proper earthquake resistance. Knowingly or unknowingly, people just build blindly. This might be the case here also in Haiti. So most of the building collapsed. I think you can see here houses destroyed. So most of the houses destroyed, damaged, almost about 3 lakh houses. So it means that almost 90% of the houses have collapsed. Therefore, this is the kind of casualties and loss of life. So if you compare both Haiti and the Gujarat earthquakes, so Haiti was more vulnerable and buildings were more vulnerable. Therefore, losses of life were much more than the Bhuj earthquake. Might be it is not properly maintained, managed also after the even post earthquake management. So this is the situation actually. I just wanted to give you the glimpse of what exactly happened in the previous disasters. You should also know a little bit more about the past cases also, how it has happened, why it has happened. All that you must illustrate so that practically you are more competent to explain it. Let us move to the next one. So let us go to the unit 3 now. So far you understood what is the difference between the man-made disasters and the natural disasters. Under the unit 2, 1 and 2, you have understood the different terminologies, what is disaster management, what are the different phases of disaster, and all that kinds of with examples, series of examples, several examples we illustrated it. Now we go to the unit number 3. So it is disaster preparedness. So again, there could be some repetition, but this is a very important subject. Preparedness. Without preparedness, no disasters can be managed. Therefore, preparedness part is very, very important. Where does it come actually? Under different phases of disaster. It is pre-disaster phase actually. Preparedness comes under pre-disaster phase of the disaster management cycle. So what are the other activities? Preparedness, mitigation, and prevention are part of the pre-disaster phases of the disaster. So let us discuss a little bit about disaster preparedness under the unit number 3. So here are the objectives. So you will get insight into the disaster preparedness. We'll also explain the meaning of disaster preparedness. We'll examine the plans of disaster preparedness. We'll give broad overview of the infrastructure required, and then understand the prevention and mitigation strategies. So all this part comes under the preparedness phase of the disaster. Go one by one. So in the introduction, I'm just making it disaster risk reduction a priority. So basically, preparedness means what? So we are taking all the measures in order to ensure that the impacts or the effects of the disaster are reduced and managed well during the disaster and post-disaster. Basically, that is the intention. So making the disaster risk reduction a priority. So why this is under the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, which was signed by India in Japan. Disaster risk reduction is one of the top priorities of the Indian government. So every state is following that. So disaster risk reduction in every disaster, for example, the flood, how to reduce the disaster risk reduction by mitigation. Similarly, earthquake areas, how to reduce the disaster risk by mitigation and prevention. Similarly, everywhere, every disaster, cyclones. So for our cyclones, what we are doing, we are constructing cyclone shelters. For example, in coastal belt in Mangalore, we have multi-purpose cyclone shelters. Why are you building that? That is a preparedness part. If the disaster is likely to happen, cyclone is going to happen, people will be evacuated to the multi-purpose safe shelters. That is multi-purpose cyclone shelters. Cyclone shelters are built now. Earlier they were not there. Odisha has built many cyclone shelters. People will be rehabilitated or evacuated to the safe shelters. That is one important part of disaster risk reduction. So disaster risk reduction is a priority. Let us go to the next one. Improving risk information and early warning. What does it do? This comes under preparedness. Risk information. People should know which are all the hazards, how much is the vulnerability, and how they are going to be affected, and what are the roles of community, government, and others. If they don't know all these things, how to escape, how to go safe, how to live safely, how to work with others during disaster situation, they will not be able to do well. They will not be safe in case they don't know about the risk around them. Therefore, we are taking up a lot of training programs. We are informed through the plans, through the mock drills, through the awareness programs. We are providing improving the risk information among the public and among the government employees. That's what we are doing from this center. What do you mean by early warning? Early warning, is it a preparedness? Yes. Why it is preparedness? What do you mean by early warning? Early warning means, for example, during cyclone, we have early warning systems. Weather stations are there. So weather station, what they will do, whether like radars and weather station, they will give information regarding the wind speed, how it is moving, in what direction it is moving, with what speed it is moving, and is there any likely, is it likely that this Mangalore coast is going to be hit by the cyclone in the next 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, next 23 or 4 hours, what is going to happen, next 3 days, next 7 days, what is going to happen. All this early warning is given by the Indian Meteorological Department, IMD we call it as. And similarly, some state governments are also having their own system of prediction. Like in Karnataka, we have Karnataka State Natural Disaster Monitoring Center, which is also involved in giving the early warning to the public, to the government officials, so that they get prepared for the disaster well in advance. For example, Kodugu is getting NDRF battalions. Why they are getting Kodugu mean in Madikeri in Kodugu, Karnataka? They are getting regularly in the month of now May, June. Battalions will come there from National Disaster Response Force battalions. Why they come there? Because Kodugu is going to receive heavy rainfall. In turn, it is going to have landslides, flood, etc., and people will get trapped in the flooding. Therefore, they come and do mock drills. They come and do give awareness to the public, and they will also do rehearsals what to do if it is happening. It's going to happen. The heavy rainfall, all that they do. So this is also preparedness part. So this is how it is prepared due to early warning system. Serial number 3: building a culture of safety and resilience. Therefore, preparedness also includes giving awareness, giving proper education, proper information to the public regarding safety and resilience of their neighborhood, their families, their gram panchayat, etc., etc. So, a culture of safety must be inculcated among the community. Otherwise, they will not. They will just ignore, and when the disaster strikes, they will get trapped in that. So, therefore, a large amount of awareness program is being initiated by our center. So, we have large number of programs being taken up for awareness among the public. Not only among the public, on NGOs are also being covered in that. Government officials are covered, all Group A, B, C, D officials, the district level, taluk level, gram panchayat level, and at the state level. So this is very important actually. Culture of safety and resilience. Reducing the risks in key sectors. Some of the key sectors like what? So you have to reduce the risk in the key, otherwise they will lead to huge loss actually. So when you build a bridge or a flyover, you must know what are the risks in that. So you must understand the risk and first reduce the risk. How do you reduce the risk? By proper design, proper construction, ensuring that nothing untoward incident happens after the construction. So reducing the risk in key sectors. I just told you one sector. It could be in the telecommunication sector. It could be there in the critical infrastructure, lifeline infrastructure like health, like hospitals, etc. It could also be in many other sectors. Like even if you are building a canal or a dam, so it should have all the disaster risk reduction measures in that inculcated already. Otherwise, it will lead to disasters later. That is part of the preparedness. Strengthening preparedness for response. This is also another important area. So response is one of the most important part of disaster management. It is a post-disaster activity. Once the disaster strikes, you need to go and provide them proper search and rescue, relief, rehabilitation, reconstruction activities. So that which comes under the response. So if you do not have preparedness plan in place, you don't have formed teams, task forces, strike teams, etc. You do not have materials, machines, equipment properly recognized, properly identified, and kept ready. Suppose you don't have any food storage units, you don't have stored adequate amount of food, not identified or not prepared for the food items. If you do not have adequate number of boats in case of flood, so all these will lead to huge problems. Therefore, there should be a kind of incident response system in place in every district, every taluk, every department, the state, and at the national. Already in place actually. So even under the Disaster Management Act 2005, they have very clearly mentioned that incident response system should be in place. So which is all come under the which all comes under the preparedness part of the disaster phase. Okay, move to the next one. So, what is the definition of preparedness? Here, I have taken it from UNDRO. This is a United Nations definition actually. Measures designed to organize and facilitate timely and effective. Because you are all students, you need to write proper definition only. Therefore, I just put it up here. The same definition from the manual. Measures designed to organize and facilitate timely and effective rescue, relief, rehabilitation operations in cases of disaster. Setting up disaster relief machinery, formulation of emergency relief plans, training of specific groups to take up rescue and relief, stockpiling of food supplies, and earmarking funds for relief operations. So I just read this is the definition taken from the United Nations disaster office actually organization, United Nations organization. So they are doing all these kinds of documentation, and they have the website also. If you go to UNDRO, you can also get all the information. So United Nations basically give the definition of preparedness like this. In simple terms, how do you define this? So this basically implies, this definition implies that preparedness means basically proper action plan to be prepared in advance, and to implement the plan we need to have all the men, machine, materials in place, and we have to have adequate response system in place. Adequate response system means basically task forces, teams, proper coordination between the different departments, etc. So that all of them together will be able to manage the disaster. If it is prepared in advance, this can be activated after the triggering of the disaster. So once the trigger mechanism is in place, you can activate this soon after the disaster. That is what is known as preparedness. Okay. The preparedness plans can either be short term, long term, sometimes oral, sometimes written also during the disaster times, encompassing the organizational aims, objectives, structure for tackling disasters, communication system, warning arrangements, community disaster operations, operational and review, training and public awareness. So these are some of the definition taken directly from the manual here, United Nations manual. Okay, you can just mention, you just understand the definition and then you can write it, no issue. So, but it is also necessary that you should know the exact definition of preparedness. So they said that preparedness plans will be short term or long term. What do you mean by short term? Maybe for 3 months, less than a year. Generally, we call it as short term. What do you mean by long term? Maybe more than a year, 3 to 5 years, maybe more than that also sometimes, 10 years. For example, SFDRR plan is about from 2000, it is up to 2030 now. Started in 2015. For 15 years, they have prepared strategies for preparedness, etc. Like that. Okay, so now you understood the definition of preparedness in simple language. Uh, so let us move to the next one. What do you mean by disaster preparedness? Again, what does it comprises of? So if you remember all these important elements or items, then you will be able to know what is disaster preparedness. As a student, you must also know that there are many more field related activities that are being taken up under preparedness. Just merely reading the book or theory, you will not be able to understand clearly. Therefore, I am just explaining you that in real situations in field, who are all going to be part of preparedness, how they are going to work there. That is important. Therefore, task forces and committees are already formed and they are already in place. They are being trained. They are trained actually. I just now mentioned NDRF, National Disaster Response Forces. Even we have State Disaster Response Force. We have some voluntary service, voluntary organizations where volunteers we have been trained by us for 12 days in search and rescue operations, in swimming, diving, all that first medical responders. So all of them have been trained now. So they are going to be used. That is preparedness basically. So we do micro hazard zonation. Why do you do? For the same state, maybe Karnataka or Gujarat, some of the areas may be more hazardous to the earthquakes or flood. So micro hazard zonation is very important. So that is what comprises the preparedness also. Warning boards are required. Why? Some black spots will be there, like accident spots, maybe accident spots, but there is no warning board. So you need to put up a warning board with illumination. Some tanks are there where children are drowning every year and dying. But you need to put up a warning board there saying that there is a silt, there is a slush inside, and children are not allowed for swimming, like that. Something like that. So you have to put warning boards. Okay. Next, inventory of resources. Suppose inventory. What do you mean by inventory of resources for disaster preparedness? So, what are all the resources available in the district, or in the taluk, or in the gram panchayat, maybe in the entire state? We need to document all the resources, both human resources and material resources. For example, how many JCBs are available, how many ambulances are available at any point, how many beds are available in the hospital, how many super specialty hospitals, how many other hospitals, all that kind of information. Even how many schools are available in the taluk or in the district, which are used for evacuation or relief operations. So all these kinds of resources, okay, so that they are going to be identified well in advance and they are going to be mapped and they are going to be used for managing any disaster. So that is part of the preparedness. If you have all the data, if you have all the contact numbers, you can call them, you can make use of their resources immediately. Maybe either it may be private or it may be government. So whatever may be the resource, you need to identify that and ensure that such resources are available at the time of disaster. This is part of the preparedness. The most important part of the disaster preparedness is giving training, imparting training, skill upgradation of the officials, task forces, etc. For example, there were volunteers very recently. They were not knowing anything. For example, they did not know first medical responder skills, first aid skills, search and rescue skills. So we imparted them training for 12 days. Now they are fit to be deployed during any future disaster. So that is how the training is imparted to the public and communities. So capacity building includes, the need for resources. For example, there is a fire service department. So fire emergency department requires what to manage disaster. They need maybe hazmat van, it is not there, so you have to buy it. What is hazardous material in van? So they may need 2 more fire engines, so you have to provide them like that. Every taluk or every gram panchayat requires a fire engine, so you have to provide it. There is no fire task forces being formed, then you have to form them. Training is not they have to give them training. There is no budget available for managing any flood situation next year. So make provision for that. So what is this? This is basically capacity building. Okay. So capacity building of what? Maybe community, gram panchayat, taluk, authorities, or urban local bodies, panchayat raj institutions, and departments in the government, and everybody. So all that capacity building comes under that. So what is medical preparedness? So all the hospital, because any disaster, maybe earthquake, flood, cyclone, building collapse, fire incidents, we name any disaster, it requires the first medical responder preparedness. If there is no medical responders available with the skills, there will be there will be more number of deaths and injuries. Loss of life will be more. Therefore, every hospital, every primary health care center, every community health center, every city hospital, every super specialty hospital must have mass casualty management, burn injury management, disaster management facilities in their hospitals. So that is very, very important. All the critical infrastructure required for managing the mass casualties, injured persons should be available in the hospitals. What do you mean by mock drills? Mock drills comes under preparedness? Yes. Mock drills means generally we take up mock drills in industries, in public places, wherever disasters are likely to happen, like Dasara, like any other festivals. So there could be possible that disasters may strike. Therefore, for that particular disaster scenario, we do the mock drills. How to manage the disaster in case it happens. So public awareness will be given and people will be alert if mock drills are done regularly, which we are doing here from our center also. Government is also doing some mock drills. NDMA is doing, SDMA is conducting some mock drills. Center for Disaster ATI Mysore, we are also doing some mock drills every year. So as part of our programs, so this is how it is done. IEC and evacuation training, we do a lot of IEC materials here from our center. We publish a lot of materials, we send a lot of templates, a lot of pamphlets, newsletters, and also books and books, etc. etc. So they are all prepared and sent to the people, employees, departments, etc. for reference. Particularly, like recently we prepared do's and don'ts. Do's and don'ts during flood, do's and don'ts during earthquake, do's and don'ts cyclones, do's and don'ts during COVID-19, do's and don'ts like that. For all types of disasters, we mentioned that. So people will read, people will understand what to do and what not to do. Okay. Then we have evacuation training. Very, very important. For example, a person is injured, there are about 20 people, how to evacuate them is also very important. Just I want to mention that during evacuation in one of the flood situations in Belgavi, in Karnataka, long ago, one boat was capsized and because of the heavy loading, there were 27 people in the boat, and it is actually exceeded the capacity of the boat, and therefore boat capsized in the middle of the river, and then all of them died there. Therefore, evacuation training is very, very important. It can happen anytime, so not only in flood, but it can happen anywhere. So that you need to give them proper training. Even as simple as a person with spinal injury need to be taken very safely as compared to other normal injured persons. The spinal injured person is taken just casually, he may die, and his injury will lead to major disability. So that is how the training need to be important. We are doing this kind of training in ATI campus and also at the districts every year. Community-based disaster management is another area where we are trying to give training to the community at the Gram Panchayat and NGOs, volunteers, etc. So they are very important because in any disaster, the first responder is always the local community, and therefore they should need to be part of the disaster management structure in the Gram Panchayat and even the urban local bodies. They need to be trained, they need to be used, they need to be also participants. They should participate in every disaster management activity, starting from the planning to the response stage. Otherwise, we don't know how they are. Otherwise, their local traditional skills will be left out. So, because they are also the first responder, they should know how to rescue themselves before the arrival of the police or fire from the external sources. So it is also that is therefore community-based disaster management is important. Disaster management plans we are preparing every year at the district, at Taluk, Gram Panchayat, at the state level, departmental level. So they are also being revised. This is important part of the preparedness. So unless you prepare the plans, you will not be able to implement them, revise them. So already they are in place and they are getting revised every year and they are implemented also. Inventory of lifeline buildings. What do you mean by lifeline buildings? Hospitals, schools, water lines, maybe electricity, maybe such type police. All such type of lifeline buildings need to be properly retrofitted, repaired, and kept in safe condition. Otherwise, if they collapse, then there will be nobody to help the others. Therefore, this is very, very important. How many are the? You should do an inventory of lifeline buildings and start taking measures to retrofit them, repair them. That is very, very important. Okay. So then use of best practices. Like, we document best practices, case studies, action research. We document here in our center. Likewise, everybody, I think every major important institution in India is taking up that. They are doing also. So we are also doing that, and we use these best practices. Like, we go and document it. There is any good case study, case, which is managed very well. We'll document it and use it as a best practice. For example, flood was very well managed in last 2 years back in Raichur. Why it is successful? Because they have erected all the milestones. They have erected all the levels of the flooding levels. People were alerted immediately, and then they were evacuated safely. There was no loss of life, and people were safe like that. So such practices are documented and brought to the classroom for training. Create communication network. So this is an excellent, actually, very important thing. Communication, sometimes network could be as simple as social media also, maybe WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and even other Twitter, etc., etc. We'll also use mobile apps wherein all the important persons who are supposed to manage the disasters are grouped, and they are sent messages through mobile apps, and they will be alert. So all these kinds of things are being done now in the communication network. Budgetary allocations are also very important. Every year we need to allocate budget for disaster management. That is mandatory under the Disaster Management Act 2005. Every department, every institutions, organization, every local body must allocate certain percentage of, or depending on the type of disasters, vulnerability, they need to allocate budget and prepare action plans and implement them so that disaster risk is reduced every year in that area. So these are very, very important. Just when I was explaining something, it is very, very practical. You must all understand why preparedness is very, very important in management of disasters. Okay. For the next one. So recovery. Let us give some light on the recovery. Disaster recovery, it is basically. So, for example, recently in Kodagu, I'm just giving some practical examples so that you will understand the theory better, so that you will be able to write your exam better with examples. What do you mean by recovery? Recovery, for example, recent Kodagu disaster, there were landslides. As a result of landslide, what has happened? Almost all the roads were damaged. Almost all the roads were damaged, and there were blockages also. There was most of the roads were blocked. Now, how do you recover that immediately? Because otherwise, the transportation get affected. So immediately, within 1 week, within 24 hours, within 3 days, most of the roads were repaired and brought back to normalcy. That recovery starts maybe immediately after the disaster. So, for example, a hospital was also damaged. Most of the equipments were drowned in the water. So immediately that hospital was recovered, water was pumped out, and all the equipments were brought back. So now the hospital starts working within 12 hours. So what is this called? Recovery. So you can quote many such examples of disaster recovery. Okay. So next one is community awareness on health. It is very, very important. So about health, community should be given all kinds of awareness, do's and don'ts, tips for maintaining the health during flood, during earthquake, during any COVID-19 or any such type of disaster, so that people get recovered faster. Counseling programs are also very important. Why you do counseling? Counseling, there are basic techniques of counseling. People get affected due to disaster psychologically, socially, mentally. So they need to be given proper training using basic techniques like ventilation is one of the technique. Maybe socialization is another technique. Maybe externalization means by doing some yoga, meditation, etc., or bringing them out of the trauma by playing some games. All these things have happened in Latur earthquake and Bhuj earthquake, which we did there. So counseling is very, very important so that people will come out of the trauma and maybe they are streamlined and maybe mainstreamed with other communities. Otherwise, they will be suffering. Restoring the essential services like water supply, sanitation, electricity, they are very, very important. Schools, etc., hospitals, and then providing shelters to the community is also another important issue. So because after the disaster, our shelters have damaged, many have collapsed, many things might have happened. So we need to provide them shelters. That is very important. For example, many rehabilitation projects, we have built many houses. Recently in Kodagu also, about more than 800 houses have been built. There have been very earthquake resistant buildings only, landslide resistant buildings. So such housing with all the basic amenities, with all the basic infrastructure need to be provided. Otherwise, nobody will go there. So that is very important because it has happened in Raichur, in many places, in Belagavi, and many other states also. Many people have not occupied the shelters after the construction because they were not convenient to live. So that is what happens. Collecting usable materials, very, very important. So you have to collect the usable, like not only food material but even clothing, etc., etc. All of that needs to be collected much before or during the immediately after, before the disaster or after the disaster, or we need to identify where they are available so that they can be deployed during the disaster situation. They can be used. Financial support is very important because financial support, what do you mean by financial support for disaster recovery? Is basically how much is the loss, how much is the damage, how much money is required to bring the situation back to normalcy. All that counts actually. Government gives money from the NDRF funds like National Disaster Response Fund, National Disaster Mitigation Fund. These two important funds are already created at the national level. So already the funds being released to the state governments. In turn, it goes to the district administration and to the PRIs, Panchayat Raj, local bodies, etc. So all that is already streamlined at the central level, state level, and district and local levels. So financial support is available from the government, but at the same time, we need to mobilize resources from the public, from the other sources also, like CSR activities, etc. Employment opportunities is another important area because in any disaster, after the disaster, many people will lose their livelihoods and employment. So if they don't get employment, then there will be a lot of problems. For example, they are living in an area, in a town where disaster happened and they were already working in that industry. They lost their employment now. Then they will be deprived of the income. So what to do? So they need to be provided with livelihood activities, or the kind of damages that have happened to the industries or the sources of employment, they need to be brought back to normalcy. So that is very important. Many places, in rehabilitation projects in Raichur, Belagavi, and other places, many states also, people have not occupied the houses because of poor employment opportunities nearby. So we need to know about it. There was a message. Okay. Employment opportunity is another area which we need to explore actually. Because of the poor opportunities available in the rehabilitation projects in many states, many places, even in Karnataka, neighboring states, people have not occupied the new settlements. So that is also important. But they are asking some. So, friends, just continue up to 1 o'clock. So, employment opportunities, livelihood activities, very, very important. So, then reconstruction. This I just wanted to mention that even in near Mysore in HD Kote Taluk and in Nanjanagur Taluk, very recently I went for a documentation of documentation last year. They were all houses were flooded there near Nanjanagur Devasthan temple, and many people lost their raw materials like they used to bamboo and other things. They were telling that there is no material to grow, there is no place, there is no house, how to do this kind of livelihood activities now. So they are almost lost everything there. So they were all dependent completely on the government for relief and compensation. They put up in a big community hall and they were provided free food and other things. So once the river was subsided, then they were all went back to the same houses after a few days. So until then, maybe after 2 3 months, they don't have any employment opportunities. So that was only a temporary arrangement, but sometimes you need to provide permanent employment opportunities also somehow. So that is very important. I just mentioned you that Kodugu rehabilitation reconstruction project. It is very well built actually. There is a separate class by itself. I will not mention here. But 800 houses which have been very well built there. Now the people have been given their title deeds. Most of them have occupied the houses. House is monolithic construction with all the sanitary facilities, roads, basic infrastructure like water supply, electricity, sanitation, etc. House is very well constructed with multi-hazard resistant buildings. That is very important. So they are very safe now. So it is also nearer to their livelihood activities. So they can go to city. There is a bus facility. So such reconstruction projects will be successful. So that is what we need to do. Okay. So this comes under recovery now. We go to the next slide. So see, not only recovery, reconstruction, mitigation, but prevention is also very important. What do you mean by prevention? How do you prevent by land use planning? First, in that way, you can discuss. How do you prevent disaster risk by proper land use planning? So this is important. This way you can analyze. So Suppose there is a flood area, flood plain. Every year there is going to be a flood, there is a river. On either side there is going to be water during heavy rainfall, and that area is inundated, drowned. So that is a flood plain actually. And water is always coming there every year due to heavy rainfall. But why you are going to build houses there? And why there is a habitation, settlement? So that is the problem. So land use planning should be done properly so that land use planning is an important area, important issue. We should avoid basically such type of floodplains, earthquake vulnerable areas, floodplain areas, landslide prone areas. While when you are doing land use planning, avoid construction on the natural water tanks. Don't encroach the natural water tanks, bunds, etc. So that you are preventing the future disasters. Now Bangalore city, Chennai city, or even Delhi, Mumbai, why they are facing floods every year? It is because they have not followed proper land use planning. Maybe encroachment might have happened. That is the reason. Okay, preventing habitation. This I already explained this just now. Preventing habitation in risk zones. I just told you this already. So avoid construction, development, habitation in high risk zones basically, disaster risk zones. Leave it open, leave it to the forest, leave it to the gardens, leave it to the open grounds, playgrounds, etc. So that the risk is reduced. Okay. Disaster resistant buildings. In India, when I was in Delhi, I was working there. GB Pant Hospital, Delhi Police Headquarters, Delhi University buildings. Some of these lifeline buildings were taken up for repair and retrofitting. Why they were taken? Because Delhi comes under Zone 4, earthquake zone, and buildings were constructed without proper earthquake resistance in design. So planning and design. Therefore, they were doing after the construction. So basically, earthquake resistant buildings need to be constructed before the construction, not after the construction. It will take more time and more money as compared to the planning and designing and construction of houses before the construction. Therefore, you can save a lot of money, maybe about 15 to 20%. If it takes maybe about 10%, it will take now. Earlier, it was only about 4 to 6% of the total cost of the house for constructing a resistant building. Now, if it is constructed, and then you will have to spend about 25%, more than 25%. So, post construction cost is much more than pre-construction cost. So, therefore, pre-planning, pre-designing is much more important than post-construction retrofitting. So, you need to think about it. Finding ways to reduce risk even before the disaster strikes. Finding ways to reduce the risk even before the disaster strikes. It is everybody has to do this, even at the family level, at the Gram Panchayat level, Taluk level, everywhere. If we know that there's going to be a fire due to some existing hazards, we need to identify that, and we need to reduce the risk. Otherwise, it will happen. Actually, disaster will happen. If we know that there is going to be a black spot every year, every week, every month, there is a road accident in that particular spot. If you do not take risk reduction measures, you do not realign the road, if you do not construct proper, erect certain warning signs or signals, this will continue actually. That is what it is. You have to find the ways. Okay. Similarly, community awareness and education, very, very important. So therefore, we are giving a lot of education, communication to the school teachers, school headmasters, all the volunteers, NGOs, etc. from our institution. A lot of awareness programs have been launched, and in large numbers, even in the satellite communication also, we are imparting training. awareness programs. At a time, all 176 households are participating in our awareness program through satellite communication. So that is also being done in order to prevent the disasters. See, these are some of the preventive measures you can see. So if something is there, so already you are taking care of that. So COVID-19, how the preventive measures are taken up here. So already there, everything is available like that. Some of the pictures. So here the diseases are likely to happen. So already something is done. Preventive measures. Okay, just to show you the some of the examples of prevention. There are many more examples. Just I show health sector. So disaster response. What do you mean by disaster response? Basically, I already explained you in the earlier slides. The response is a mechanism to manage to provide the search and rescue relief operations to the community, to the victims of the disasters. That is very important. How do you respond if your preparedness in place, if your task force is in place, if your trained personnel in place, teams are in place, all of them will be deployed to the search and rescue, evacuation, relief, and other activities. That is what is known as response. It is a mechanism or a system wherein trained personnel, teams of trained personnel will be deployed along with their equipment and machine materials for effective management of disaster. For example, in Ballari building collapse, I can just quote the example. They started in it happened in 2010. So within 14 days, they very well managed. So the NDRF came there, our local people were there, our fire people were there, emergency staff were there, everybody was there. All of them they were formed into teams. Every team was deployed there 24 by 7, and giving rest to the other teams who were working for 12 hours. So they managed for 14 days. They recovered the entire, not only recovered the people, but also many people were rescued and they were alive. Some were dead, some were alive. But within 14 days, they worked on war footing and they could able to help the district administration for effective response. That's how they did it actually. One example I just quoted. Even in COVID-19 also, many teams were formed at the booth level, at the district level, taluk level. They all worked under IRS system, incident response system. Okay. We have emergency operations center at the district. Every district is having this. It's like a control room where 24 by 7 walkie-talkie communication network is there. Telephone is there, so they will all work 24. So they will receive the calls, they will help the community, they will alert the departments, teams, etc. That is what is known as emergency operations center. So we have at the state level at the KSNDMC also. We have in SDM also there is a state level emergency operations center. Central level also there is an emergency operations center where all the minimum emergency equipment is placed. Communication network is established with states, districts, and lower levels. So everybody knows what is happening in the state and districts. If there is any disaster, automatically all the messages will go to the state level emergency center. They start taking all the operations, inform all the departments, task forces, strike teams, STRF, NDRF, etc. And they'll go and start the work. That is how the emergency operation centers are functioning. Alert mechanisms, early warnings, all of them will again, basically the early warning is given by the IMD in case of flood and water rainfall, even earthquake also. And alert mechanisms are generally given by the SDMA, for example, the State Disaster Management Authority, state level emergency operation centers, IMD, etc., etc. So once you receive the early warning, district administration will take up the activities. We have DRR framework here, disaster risk reduction framework. DRR means disaster risk reduction framework. There's a policy, there's DMAC, there's risk mapping. All of these activities are taken up here in our center also. So we have taken up a lot of research activities here under this, documenting some case studies, etc. under this particular area. DM Act is being implemented for the first time during COVID-19. Most of the sections have been implemented. And until then, it was not properly even heard also by many of them. Because of COVID-19, many sections were implemented by the district administration across the country. Across the central government has implemented, state government has implemented, basically SDM, NDM, etc. So all of them have implemented DM Act provisions because there are stringent laws or sections are there in this act. So one cannot ignore that. We have probabilistic scenario building for different levels of disasters to which different areas of state are vulnerable. So we have developed certain scenarios. If this is the rainfall, what is the likely flooding? If this is the kind of earthquake, earthquake scenario, what could be the number of buildings getting collapsed? What is how much of area is going to be damaged? All that kind of scenarios. So, for example, there is a mass gathering. If so many people are likely to come and gather in a particular place, what is the likely scenario of stampede? And how, if the stampede happens, how it should be managed without loss of life and damage? Such scenarios are developed in our plans, and we take early measures to see that no loss of life is there. That is what is known as disaster response. For example, we prepared Hampi disaster management plan. There is a festival going on every year there. If the festival is going to happen every year, what is the preparedness level? What is the response mechanism they have, which we prepared for them and given them, and they are implementing it. Like Hampi Heritage Area Management Authority. So even heritage buildings need to be managed. Heritage festivals have to be managed properly because lakhs of people assemble at a particular point of time. So all these are very, very important. I'm telling you some practical examples because you need to know. Otherwise, this theory will not help you simply if I just tell this. The yearly schedule for conduct of mock exercises. Yes, we have every year we have this mock drills. SDM is also SDM means State Disaster Management Authority is also having. Even NDM is also having every manual plan. So we are conducting mock drills regularly. So like industrial mock drills, very recently last month we did it in Mysore, where about 60 people participated in that. So that like that. So we do that. So basically, what do you mean by preparedness plan? So it is generally a written plan actually, which you can see from our website also. There is a state disaster management plan which you uploaded on the website of ATI Mysore. You can read the document. It is freely downloadable, so you can download it. We have uploaded some district plans also there. You can see them, which will help the district administration to prepare. Hampi disaster management plan is also there. You can see there. We have almost uploaded almost all the documents. You can go through them and you can read them. Develop a written plan. First is to develop a written plan. You have to prepare that and then keep the plan up to date. Regularly, you have to revise it. Do drills there, regular drills. Then equipment, etc., whatever is required, you need to maintain resources basically. Then establish and train in-house response teams you need to develop with appropriate training. Otherwise, they will not work. Training in disaster response techniques. For example, first medical responder training, techniques in rescue, techniques in rehabilitation, etc. So we give all of that to the employees, officers, in different techniques. So we use not only we conduct programs in collaboration with the NDRF, SDRF, and fire and emergency services, and many more organizations, so that they get appropriate training and skills, so that they are going to work properly during search and rescue operations. Prepare and keep an up-to-date set of documents. This is very important because the documentation of disaster activities is very important. If we don't document, we don't know where the resource is deployed, where the people are working, how many people have died, how many people are given food, how many people are not given food. Nothing will be in control. So we need to have proper documentation system in place, which, for example, an app should be developed or some Microsoft Access can be used, Excel sheet can be used. But you need to know the proper deployment of resources and the exact data of the site. Okay, so otherwise they will be confused. Go to the next one. So what do you mean by mitigation? So you just remember like this mitigation. What do you mean mitigation? Basically, the meaning is reducing the risk, taking measures to reduce the risk of a disaster. That is meaning of the mitigation. Okay. So what do you mean by reducing the risk of a disaster? For example, earthquake. So how do you reduce the risk of a disaster? By constructing better houses, by retrofitting the existing houses. That is mitigation. That is structural mitigation, building mitigation, structural mitigation. What do you mean by non-structural mitigation? Non-structural means giving awareness about do's and don'ts, about fire safe measures, about cyclone safe measures, about disease during COVID-19 do's and don'ts, like that. They are all coming under non-structural measures. Suppose students from school are drowning every year in a water tank nearby. When they go for swimming, they just drown and got stuck inside inside the water, in the slush, and they die. Why they are dying every year? Because students are not given proper awareness. Their parents are not given proper awareness about the dangers of slush in the water tank. So that is why we call it as non-structural mitigation. What do you mean by non-structural mitigation? It may comprises giving proper information, giving proper awareness, giving proper education to the students, or giving proper communication. So all these uh, will have very greater impact, very great impact on the public. Okay, that is why mitigation of a disaster is very important. The next one. So even hazard mapping is also comes under map. So planning, mapping, so vulnerability mapping, hazard mapping, resource mapping, social mapping, all these are also part of mitigation. Actually, enforcement of land use and zoning practices. So building bylaws, zoning regulations, building codes. You see, we have a 1893 building code. No, but many of the people are not using it even today also. So they should use it while designing the building. We have many fire codes, so they should use it. A building which is more than 15 meters of height should have all compliance, fire compliance, NOC, etc. need to be taken. Similarly, building bylaws will also restrict the construction actually in this pattern, in this margins, this height, how the foundation should be in that particular area. All that are given in the building codes and building bylaws. So you need to maintain, you need to implement them and also enforce them properly. Otherwise, situation like Kodagu, where buildings have just collapsed, situation like Uttarakhand, where buildings have collapsed, which are not properly constructed, situation like Bangladesh building where it is collapsed, Ballari building collapsed, many buildings collapsed in Bengaluru also, Mumbai also, everywhere. So such things will happen otherwise. Floodplain mapping. So what I am saying is how much area is prone to flooding. The map should depict that. Based on the previous year's data, we should map them properly. So vulnerability maps, flood vulnerable maps. Okay. So that will be used for proper planning, flood planning now. Next, flood mitigation, flood preparedness, etc. What do you mean by safe shelters for earthquake, flood, cyclone? So you need to also build safe shelters for earthquake, flood, cyclone. These are very important. Already these initiatives have been initiated in coastal belts, particularly Odisha. Odisha, they have constructed about 5,000. See, if one shelter is occupying, is used for about more than 5,000 people. It's huge shelter. Actually. In Mangalore also we have some cyclone shelters built there. Like that. So that kind of shelters are required. during any disaster, such disasters. Public awareness, already I told you about this. Insurance is another important area. So there is a crop insurance scheme, Prime Minister's Fasal Bima Yojana. So that's insurance scheme actually. Whenever crops are failed, then insurance can be claimed by the farmers. For different types of crops, there are different ceilings rates. So there is a premium, there is a insurance claims by the farmers. So that is going on every year. So it is at the Hubli level now, Gram Panchayat and Hubli levels. So farmers are enrolled in the National Agriculture Insurance Company and they are getting all these insurance claims. Okay, so this is how it is. So this is each one of them is a topic by itself. So I can just mention that this is how it is done. So infrastructure for disaster preparedness is very important. So how it is important? There are it forms two important categories actually: socio-economic development and long-term recovery and reconstruction. So there are two important. So this is more important actually. Why it is so important? Because the amount of money or resources required for long-term recovery from the disaster is very important. Therefore, we recently followed different tools and techniques methodology for calculating or estimating the losses and damages in floods in Karnataka state. It is practiced everywhere actually, but in Karnataka for the first time we practiced this year. The amount was much more than what they had estimated actually, and we submitted the report to the government, central government for compensation. We conducted a training on how to calculate, how to estimate the losses and damages here. In turn, those teams went there and deployed for estimating the losses and damages using the standard tools and methods. For example, loss and damage for electricity to be calculated in a standard format only. Similarly, loss and damage for housing, loss and damage for roads, loss and damage assessment for drains, water supply, like that. So there are different tools are there, templates are there, methods are there. We need to use that and estimate the or assess the total losses and damages. Then submit the report to the government for release of funds. That is how the long-term reconciliation is done. Okay, this is being done already. So I'm just explaining practical aspect of the infrastructure required. Okay. Even this information sharing also. So we have so much of networks, and we use it for network information sharing. For example, KSNDMC is there. We have a huge network of radio stations, weather stations, earthquake monitoring stations, and even sensors, Bangalore, landslide sensors, even flood sensors. All of that has been installed now under the network. Information immediately given to the concerned authorities so that they will activate their teams. So that is how it is done now. Multi-hazard early warning system is already in place in Karnataka and everywhere now. So centers of excellence in disaster management. Ours is one of them. NIDM is another one. National Institute of Disaster Management. In Bhopal also there is one institution. Every state is having one center of excellence in disaster management. Karnataka is having here in MITI Mysore, which we are managing here, like that. In Bangalore also we have KSNDMC, which manages all the natural disasters. There in Bangalore city also. We have research centers to know the trends in natural disasters also. They are all important part of preparedness. This is important actually. Community-based disaster preparedness. in the area of preparedness, community preparedness is very important because community is always the local people who know which are all the disasters, which are all the hazards, which are all the dangers which they are going to face every year, and what should be done. Also, they may be knowing. But our job is from the government or from the outside is to help them bridge that gap. What should be done, how they should rescue themselves in case of any flood or any fire incident or any other disaster. So our job is to help them. So what to do? Community under the community-based disaster management. This is an important area in your syllabus. Therefore, community participation is very important in disaster management. How do you ensure community participation? At the local level, at the Gram Panchayat, we need to ask them to come and sit with them as a member in the committees, disaster management committees. Ask them. For example, there is a person with disabilities. Maybe about in a Gram Panchayat, there are about 200 families having disabled persons. So, how do you map them? In case of flood, they will not be able to escape. Neither the government will be aware of where they are located. So they will be left out and others will run away from their houses. So this is if the community at the local level know where they are located, which families are having such people, aged persons, women, children, etc. Vulnerable people need to be also rescued. It is possible only when they are participating in the local plans preparation, and their voice is heard by the government, Gram Panchayat, and so that what should be done for these particular vulnerable groups and how they can contribute in the search and rescue, relief, or rehabilitation activities. And all that has to be done much before the disaster. So, community participation in disaster activities, starting from planning, mitigation, preparedness, and finally response, is very, very important because there may be blind persons, they will not be knowing how to read. So there are symbols, warnings, etc., but they will not be knowing. But how to communicate to them? That is only community can do that. Similarly, there are people who are cannot hear. So how do you communicate to them? That is very important. People who cannot walk, how do you communicate to them? So all these are very, very important things. Aged persons are there. How do you communicate to them? Women, children, they will not be even aware of what is happening around them during disasters. You can see here one picture I have shown here. There are 93 children were charged to death in Kumbakonam in Tamil Nadu in a school. Neither the students were aware of do's and don'ts, nor the teachers were aware of the do's and don'ts. As a result, all 93 children in the school were charged to death in a fire incident. That is why I'm saying local community, local teachers, local students, those who are living in that area must be knowing do's and don'ts. They should also be knowing about the risk, about the disasters in the school, school plans, Gram Panchayati plan, city plan, hospital plan. Every plan is required. Everybody should know. There should be teams, there should be first aid teams, there should be mock drill teams in every place, in every institution. Otherwise, you will end up in such type of losses and loss of life, basically. Okay, you can see here. This is the picture I am showing. Just to illustrate an example, how important is the community participation. I wanted to tell about this. Go to the next one. You can see here this actually I took this a real picture. See this woman, how she is suffering. Men and women often experience disasters differently. Understanding these differences is critical in disaster management. Okay, so almost this child is drowning there, and this is holding actually. So this is the situation for women, children. What about physically persons with disabilities? What about persons, old age persons? So all these have to be understood very clearly. Their vulnerabilities have to be managed assessed, and they need to be participating in that. Their demands, their needs have to be understood, how they should be rescued, how they should be rehabilitated, how they should be given relief in the relief shelters. Maybe they may be requiring ramp, they may be requiring wheelchairs, they may require other kinds of support. Everything needs to be done. Otherwise, the community, if they are not aware, this type of situation will happen. To the next one. So in preparedness stage, so hazard can strike anyone, irrespective of the caste, religion, richness, poor, rich. No, it will not differentiate between anybody. It can affect everybody. Okay. Why community participation is important? Because they understand the local problems better. They may have some indigenous protocols. Already they know how to protect themselves. They take right decisions in planning because they know the problems. They also know the solutions. Persons with disabilities, they can understand how to rescue them. Aged, women, children problems, they can understand very easily. How many are there? How many people are children? All that kind of thing. What are their needs? And how many vulnerable groups, health morbidities, etc., etc. Learning from disaster. So all this can be done if you properly ensure the community participation. Why I am putting these pictures here? You can see in tsunami in Nagapattinam in Tamil Nadu, even Andaman Nicobar also in 2004 December. You can see the children, women are the most vulnerable and they are the victims. Therefore, they need to be trained properly. They need to be given awareness properly. They need to be participating. So that is what I wanted to tell through this picture. I don't know whether it's going to be. There is a video here. It is not switching on actually. There is no facility here to show the video, but it is very interesting how the community can participate in disaster management. Later on, we will show it later maybe. For the next one, the last unit is in this session is role and responsibilities of central and state governments. According to your syllabus, Unit 4 is very important because you need to know, all of you need to know how the central government, state government, local authorities, local bodies are supposed to perform under the provisions of the Disaster Management Act 2005. There is a disaster management policy framework at the central and state levels. So under these provisions, how these government bodies must function. See that disasters are properly managed. And what are the institutional framework, how the legal provisions are implemented, how the plans are prepared, how the teams are formed, how they are implemented, and what are the roles and responsibilities of the officers in different departments. So you must know this much so that you will be able to do better there, okay, in the exams. Let's go to the next one. So in this unit, we will see government's approach in dealing with disasters, as the role of central government, role of state government. We have NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority. We have State Disaster Management Authority, District Disaster Management Authority, local authorities also, and role of district administration, and role of armed forces, police, paramilitary, etc. So these are the areas given in, these are the syllabus areas you need to focus in your syllabus. Okay, I'll go and elaborate that now with the chart. There is a chart which explains everything. I'll just give some examples so that you will understand better. So let us discuss about the central and state government now. So we'll go to the, this chart gives everything now. If you remember this chart, You can write the entire everything. Okay, you can remember better. So, what is the institutional framework in India for disaster management? There is a government of India at the national level. Home department actually is the nodal department, and under this we have National Disaster Management Authority, supported by National Executive Committee (NEC). Okay, at the central level, it is an advisory body to the NDMA. NDMA is headed by the Prime Minister of India. NEC is headed by Home Secretary. Okay. Below that, we have National Institute of Disaster Management for training and research activities at the central level. Also, there is a National Disaster Response Force. NDRF is set up at the national level, and also their units are located across the country now. We have National Disaster Mitigation Resource Center also. So this is at the national level setup, institutional setup. So below that, directly we have, at the same time I just explained here only, at the state level, every state is having state disaster management authority, supported by state executive committee. While NDMA is headed by the prime minister, SDMA is headed by the chief minister of the state. Here NEC is headed by home secretary, whereas in SEC, state executive committee is headed by the chief secretary, and other secretaries are also there in that. Okay. NDMA is having also not more than 9 members. One vice chairman is also there. SDMA is having also more about 9 members, and there's a vice chairman also, a revenue minister, and other ministers are members. Okay, in the state. And below this, I explained you NDMA and SDMA now. Below that, there is a DDMA. DDMA means District Disaster Management Authority. What do you mean by District Disaster Management Authority? It is the nodal administration for all disasters in district level, and it is headed by the district collector or the deputy commissioner of the district, and co-chaired by the Jilla Panchayat chairperson, elected chairperson. And there are about not more than 9 members. They are taken from different departments at the district, like Mysore city, city corporation commissioner will be 1 member, superintendent of police will be 1 member, chief executive officer of the Jilla Panchayat is 1 member. Like that, there are about 7 members plus another 2 members, totally 9 members. Okay, this is at the DDMA. So what they do actually, what NDMA does, what is the role of NDMA? Role of NDMA is the policy making body. Actually, it is the policy making body, is the policy framer for the entire disaster management in India. So NDMA is the overall authority for the entire country. It is chaired by Prime Minister of India. So they prepare policies to be given to the states for implementation. They prepare guidelines for every type of disaster to be implemented by the state governments. They prepare handbooks, research, etc., policies, guidelines, legal framework, etc., for to be implemented by the state governments. This is what the major function of National Disaster Management Authority. NDMA, under the support of NEC, will also manage, declare all kinds of disasters at the national level or at the state level sometimes. So, for example, COVID-19 was declared as national disaster. So, they have done that. Similarly, they have all the authorities to give instructions to the state governments from time to time in case of any possible threat from the disasters. So NDMA Also frames policies from time to time, prepares the national disaster management plan every year, revises the policies of the national policy on disaster management, prepare guidelines every year and revise their guidelines. For example, they prepared a drought manual, guidelines for chemical disaster, guidelines for earthquake, guidelines for cyclones, guidelines for fire incidents, guidelines for all kinds of disasters they have prepared and gave it to the state government for implementation. So I just mean to say that NDMA is a overall think tank, policy framer, and also giving instructions, guidelines to the state governments for effective implementation. That is what the NDMA is doing. An important other aspect is other function of the NDMA is to release funds, assess the losses and damages in the states due to different disasters, and assess the losses and damages, give the compensation to the state governments. That is what another important aspect. They have also appoint the finance commissions like Central Finance Commission to assess the amount of money to be given to different states depending on the vulnerability. That is what the NDMA is doing. So all these functions are done by NDMA. At the state level, SDMA is doing all these functions actually. So on the same lines. Okay. Similarly, DDMA is basically district level disaster management authority, which is implementing all the instructions given under by the NDMA, SDMA at the district level. In fact. So deputy commissioner or district collector is the overall authority, overall implementing authority of disasters, disaster management in the district. So they have also given all the powers at the district level. So they can take the resources from other departments. They can order the other departments to work. So they can order for the facilities to be created for disaster management, cordoning off, or any such type of implementation of the disaster management act at the district level. Provisions like legal provisions can be implemented by them. So all these kinds of activities are done by the district disaster management. At the state level, we have state SDMP, state plan. At the district level, every district DDMA is preparing the DDMP, district plan. So everything is there. State, the national level, national plan, state level, state plan, district level, district plan. It is revised every year, and we are helping them to do this. Okay, these are the functions which they are doing at the national, state, and district levels. And what are these below there? States, cities, governments. So I have already mentioned you SDMA. I have already mentioned you DDMA. Okay. Departments will also, for example, there is agriculture department, there is animal husbandry, there is police, fire, home guard. All of them will be assisting them during disaster. There is a state disaster response force created in every state, and they are going to help with them. So all departments will be part of state disaster management authority during disasters. Every department is having a plan. So all of them will be, that means not only these, all the departments, in fact, in the state, almost all the departments, these are important key departments actually, civil defense, home guards, police, fire services. But almost all the departments I mentioned here, see, at the district level, almost all the departments will be deployed and formed into teams, and they will be working during disaster situations. In addition, we have even local authorities here. It's not visible here. Chapter number 6 is talking about local authorities in the Disaster Management Act. Local authorities are also given some of the important roles. They have to train their employees. They have to keep preparedness plan in place, revise it, and see that no disasters will lead to losses and damages. So their effort is to reduce the risk every year and see that no casualties happen. So that is what the local authorities like Panchayati Raj institutions, urban local bodies, and other trusts, etc., city improvement trust, or any development authorities will have to ensure in the cities and towns and villages. So this is how the entire structure is working in the country. So everybody is responsible actually. Even NGOs are also part of this here actually. Voluntary agencies and NGOs. It is not visible here due to something. So NGOs, voluntary agencies are all part of the entire system. So roles and responsibilities in brief, what NDMA does, what SDMA does, what DDMA does, and what are their functions. So this is what is there in that. Okay. So we'll go to the next one finally. Just to recap what I just said. So this is the Disaster Management Act 2005. Actually, under the Disaster Management Act 2005, all the roles and responsibilities of the state government, central government, district administration, local authorities, local bodies has been very well mentioned. So they have to work under the act only, all of them. So there is no other thing actually law other than DM Act. Maybe some state governments may be having their own act, but this act is very supreme and it supersedes all the state acts. Okay. So some, for example, some rules have been framed by the state government under this act, and they are implementing also very strictly. So just to mention you again, recapping, I'm just recapping what I just said. There is a National Disaster Management Authority, Prime Minister is the chairman. There is a State Disaster Management Authority, Chief Minister is the chairman. We have District Disaster Management Authority, DMR, District Magistrate or District Collector is the chairman, and elected chairperson of the Jilla Panchayat, Jilla Parishad is the co-chairperson. NDMA is supported by National Executive Committee. It's basically an executive body, advisory body, which helps the NDMA to take decisions. Similarly, State Executive Committee for the SDMA, for SDMA. So I told State Chief Secretary is the head of this, and here Home Secretary is the head of this, and Deputy Commissioner is the head of this. We don't have any executive committee here, but many advisory committees can be formed here at the district level. So this is what all this thing actually we have at the national level. Ministry of Home Affairs is the nodal department at the central government for all types of disasters. I already told you NIDM is there for research and training. We have National Disaster Response Force is there, which is helping during disaster response. In Karnataka, we have every state is having disaster management department, which is the nodal department. We have central government, state government, district administration, panchayats, municipalities, even NGOs. All of them are going to be part of disaster management under the Disaster Management Act 2005. So legal provisions are there. There are 11 chapters in this act and 79 sections are there. Very important sections you please see that section 51 to 60 is penal provisions. Section 44 to 50 is funding mechanism like mitigation fund, response fund, etc. We have very important sections like there shall be no discrimination on the grounds of caste, creed, etc. So that is also given under section number 61 in the Disaster Management Act. There shall be a plan at every level, district level plan, the state level plan, and central level plans. The Disaster Management Act, the chapter number 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, or 4 also. District administration is DDMA is given under chapter number 4, chapter number 3, chapter number 2, like that. Chapter number 1 deals with terminologies. Chapter number 6 deals with local authorities like panchayats and municipalities. Their functions have been given detailed very well there. Please go through the Disaster Management Act 2005. All the functions, roles and responsibilities have been very well mentioned. So just Google it and it will open and you can read it. Okay. With this, I thank all of you for your patient listening for the last 3 hours, and thank you very much. Hope to meet you again. Thank you. Now it is time to close now. It is 1 o'clock. There are any questions you can ask. How to share the video to the link? It is not uploaded actually. I will share it to the Open University and they will be able to screen it to you. I think in the link, maybe I'll do that. So that is what I will do. What do you mean by explain properly? I don't know. So I think I was very simple in explanation. Sir, I am not understanding way of your teaching. I don't know what is how to teach. So you have to send something is very specific so that I will be able to address that. Okay, thank you very much. Now it is 1 o'clock. I'm just closing it. Thank you.